As people are filtering into the event, I'll briefly introduce myself and give an overview of events. My name is Chelsea Terrian Hicks. I'm Ojage or Osage. I'm a recent graduate from the Institute of American Indian Arts. I'll introduce myself briefly in my language. Hawe, Ojage Jage Chuedoin, Ishtachi Jage Wita Chelsea, California Owadli, Wahagali Albria, Waleze on Se Dai. That means my name is Chelsea. My clan is the Gentle Peacemaker clan. I am Wahagali District or Pawhuska District. I live in California, and I'm excited to read with you today. Today we have 4 readers as guest readers. They are recent graduates from the Institute of American Indian Arts, as well as our guest reader, Ines Hernandez-Avila. She is an activist, poet, visual artist, and a wonderful teacher who I met at UC Davis. So I want to remind you all to please mute your mics as listeners if you're not speaking or asking a question. It really helps with preventing sound competition. Thank you for supporting the Thunderbird Summer Series. And now I'm going to simply wait a few moments as more people filter in. Ines used to burn plant medicine for us as she began class because she teaches in the contemplative practice of Nahuatl teachings and the philosophical traditions of other Native nations. So I'm going to burn a little Palo Santo in the spirit of her teaching. And if you want to take a moment to burn any medicines that you have that are not appropriated but well sourced and that you can use with permission, then I invite you to do so. All right, we have a full list of RSVPs today, and I see that most of them are here. So Ellie, our tech host, is welcoming everyone, and she will be helping with timekeeping and moderating questions as you place them in the chat throughout the reading. So if any of you have questions as the evening proceeds, please place your questions in the chat and I will make an effort at the end of the reading to bring those to our readers. So once more, my name is Chelsea Hicks. I'm Osage Wajaje. Hawe Wajaje Jaje Kuetoin Ishtachi Jaje Wita Chelsea, California, Owadli, Wahagali, Mikshe, Waleze on Se Dai. Thank you for supporting the Thunderbird Summer Series. This is a graduate-run initiative conceived of and run by 2020 graduates from the Institute of American Indian Arts, our Master of Fine Arts in Creative Writing program. Your attendance today is especially of value to this cohort as we lost our opportunity to share thesis work with an audience due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The Thunderbird Summer Series Volunteer Board would like to express their thanks, and I am offering that on behalf of them as I'm not a board member, but simply a student graduate. They want to express their thanks to their fellow 2020 graduates who volunteer their time and talent to host and read for these events. They would like to extend a special thanks to tonight's special guest, Ines Hernandez-Avila, and to the audience. Your presence enriches this endeavor to expand the landscape of Indigenous voices. Thanks also to Ines Hernandez-Avila for participating in this series. A reminder to our guests that this will be broadcast on radio station KQUQ and public access television stations in central New Mexico. Special thanks to Ellie, 2020 graduate and our tech host, for graciously conducting the technical side of this evening. Finally, thank you to the program directors of the Institute of American Indian Arts, MFA in Creative Writing, for offering their wisdom in guidance and support of this series. At this time, I would like to introduce our first reader, Josie Valdez. Josie Valdez is Jicarilla Apache Spanish. She lives in Dulce, New Mexico on the Jicarilla Apache Reservation. She loves to read, write, and paint. Everyone, I give you Josie Valdez.
Hello, I'm Josie Valdez, and I'm glad to be a part of the Thunderbird Summer Reading Series. And I'll be reading 4 poems. Say the words. Say the words about that time clouds pushed from the west, spiraled in geometric dash steps. A painter dappled, pondered the taste of apple on the tongue. Hours liquefied, dripped off rooftops, cooled to catch reflections of elephants and dragonflies. Wind dragged swarms, blessed as baptism in the drama of rivers and oceans. Eddies swirled through wild grass. Say the words about that time you dreamed backwards and couldn't tell the dead from the living. Colored clay caked skin, and it seemed forever dropped from the corner of your eye. And there were horses. In their dreams, those horses ran down the belly of the earth. Thought you were the illusion, drafting cells in midair. Full sunflowers emerged, blossoms attached to yellow. The sky, a tattered blue, reminds of soul and light and stars. Rings of Jupiter and seasons influenced by a recipe of orbits. Has you questioning motives. Say the words about that time you dreamed you were buried alive, skin peeled, unraveled, scattered, floating in the denseness of the Milky Way. Magenta asked for morning, and a certain purple sunset. Cut themselves in pieces with depth reciting. You placed cups on a table, said stop thinking about the empty hours. Chased the bend in water, for the spin all things are drawn to. Say the words about that time you dreamed hills burned, and the passion of it had you running a spider. Sitting at the kitchen table, you asked about my dream, the one about being locked in a room without doors, for a while feeling like I was swallowed whole, room and all. A passion for strangeness. What kind of color is a softness spoken, felt as a sensation traced in shapes of transistor afternoons? I imagine your beating heart, listening to someone play piano. I wanted a deluge, like the conversation you had about driving away, somewhere. I remember the lake, see the chrome of the dashboard, ashtray open, spilling, windows rolled down, the red vinyl seat warm from the sun. You talked about the feeling as if you were watching yourself on television. You removed your sunglasses, put them between us, said the words, and we were dream. Let the crows. Locked fingers scoop widowed branches growing thin wings. A reversal of telescopic view. Bound within the breastplate, above the heart. Heard the beat and surge of blood, circling like a moth hungry for light. I heard a sermon redundant in salty words. Bitter pinches on the lip. A question of what we dream there, danced on the candle lit for goodness. Letters written in ancient ink, absorbed the light and glowed from center. I let the crows swallow me, traversed the dream fabric, walked as if they felt the sand melt into colored glass of green and blue, trailed by shadows twice the length of the sound they emit. Lifted rain for more than an hour, sipped fiercely from cold agitation. Start the backward rush of senseless details, the lost button of a weathered cuff, untied laces, a forgotten second line. The day bled into night, spread in smooth viscosity. Curtains swayed with no volition, evaporated when it was time to wake. A battered box of photos, a broken chain, a book I carried. I heard the pages in my sleep, could taste the heat and snow, heard the heavens hum, felt at home in the darkness around stars. I raced along the shore, stabilized by backbone, pulled roots shaped from husks, braided in tree bark, healed in need of winter's hardship, cast as ice. Crows broke the surface of thought, emerged under souls as feathers, unfurled in dust. Unfolding. She became the crow feather first, then wing, then bird, each time unfolding like a piece of black paper, beneath fingers resting on the page. She brought the lamp with her, whose light glistened from eyes passing in the dark. For a moment, a transmigrated point of view. She saw herself looking back. Baskets fashioned from air, a vessel burdened by the body she finds herself in. Left to fill with the notion of flight, the stitches bound watertight. Severed sacrifice from first laceration. The bloodletting paused in midair, then smothered footprints. As droplets, she fell, scarlet hands laid on flower wreaths. Black wings, dictating dimensions relative to space. The memory filled her hands with the last time, the foundation laid straight in stone. She entered the silence incomplete, reached out to find the walls as a path unhinged. Even here she needed to orient herself among the cylinders filled with ordinary days. Some of her past and the first day of her life, each gathered in the way of thought witnesses. She wove the shell along the edges. The fine wire glowed, highlighted against black wings as they scattered their rotation. Her hands, dark brown and scarred, felt the corner where two walls came together, palm on one, fingers on the other. She stepped away and left a void, assumed the plight was laid out once again. The focal point intensified as she asked for truth. Doubt ran past, suffocating the canyon, leaping fences, cutting their trail. Then the moon lasered across her eyelids. She saw the lake of sorrow, misnamed lakes of Earth's moon. Walked the lake of forgetfulness towards the bay of rainbows. swam when her foot submerged in rainwater. The surface rose to her knee. Blue butterflies dripped at the currents, spelling out the first line of a poem, wind chime of bones clacking out the wind. Thank you.
Thank you, Josie. Incredible and beautiful reading. I would invite all of you, as you make questions, to place those in the chat for later, and we can return to them. Next, we will have Juliet Rose reading this evening. Juliet Rose is a 2020 graduate of the MFA Creative Writing Program at the Institute of American Indian Arts. She is Narragansett and Oneida Indian, as well as Sicilian. She has been writing stories since she first learned how to string words together. She writes to process trauma, express the vibrancy of stories, and give thanks to all those Mars deities who taught her how to love and find love in both the chaos and the calm. She was born and raised in southeastern Pennsylvania, but she currently resides and writes in New Orleans, Louisiana, where she has lived for the past 6 years. Everyone, please welcome Juliet.
Hello, hope y'all can hear me. My name is Juliet, and I am going to be reading a selection from my novel, which is called Wild Heart. It was also my thesis for graduation, and the selection is coming from chapter 3, which is entitled Trickster Grin. Okay. My father's people are mixed American Indian. They always tell the story on the Delaware-Lenape side. They were given land by the founder of Pennsylvania, William Penn himself, which is funny in a really not at all funny sort of way, seeing as it was their land to begin with. And then over time, throughout the 19th and 20th centuries, different parts of the family got removed and relocated to all different boarding schools. Some at the famous Carlisle School in Pennsylvania, and some in Rhode Island with the Narragansetts. My grandpa John ended up in residential school after his mother died of pneumonia when he was 4 years old, and all his siblings got split up. They cut off his hair and tried to make him a Christian. Eventually, he ended up adopted by a white family, the Astorias, and living in Syracuse without any connection to his biological family and culture, like he was becoming less and less Indian and indoctrinated into whiteness more effectively than if he'd stayed in boarding school. It's political and complicated, and a lot of the time people in my dad's family just call themselves Indians. Not because they're particularly pan-Indian or anything like that, but just because everything got so convoluted and weird during and after relocation. My grandpa John married Ellie Buck, an Oneida woman from a res in upstate New York, where they lived for a while until they went back to Lenape land in Pennsylvania. That's why my dad tends to call himself Lenape more than he calls himself Iroquois or Oneida, even though he's both. People always told me my dad made my middle name Sylvain because of how close he's always felt to the land in Pennsylvania. I thought it was nice to know there was at least one thing we could be sure my dad still liked after marrying into my mother's family. By the time I'm old enough to know about their affliction, I will already feel considerably distanced from my father, even when he's right there with me. He has always been a present, not present being. There, but not. Rooting for you, but not. Not unlike Gramps, and I mean, I do feel for the men in my family a little bit. Even if he could have known beforehand, he couldn't have really known what it would be like, could he? Could Gramps? Could Cassidy? He won't admit it, but I think that must have been part of why my dad became a truck driver. He drives through the Rust Belt, delivering slabs of iron to companies that make hammers and other tools, railroad spikes, motorcycle parts, even coffin nails. Maybe he thinks that as long as he keeps driving, everything will be okay. Maybe he's looking for something, has been looking for something his whole life, and thinks if he passes through enough nothing Pennsylvania, Ohio, West Virginia towns, he'll find it. Maybe he thinks surrounding himself with enough iron will protect him from breaking. By the time I moved to New Orleans, my father will have been delivering iron for almost 40 years. My mother often says he's more married to his trucks, to his road, to his unnamed rest stop whores than he has ever been to her, and he's chained to and by the same iron he delivers. And she is not going to take it anymore. She's just not. And by the time I move to New Orleans, she will have been saying this for almost 40 years. For Christmas, when I'm 8 years old, Grandma Ellie gives me a book of Iroquois stories. She thinks I'm too old to not know anything about where we came from. The first thing I like about the book is how pretty the cover is. It's a flat, square book with Sky Woman on the front, falling into a shiny and indigo background. Sky Woman, Legends of the Iroquois, it says in angular red letters. I take the book to school with me for my reading log every day until my 3rd grade teacher says I need to bring a new book in since I've read all the stories so many times. Over and over, I read about Sky Woman, the twins, the Star Dancers, and Grandmother Moon until I have the stories memorized, just in case I lose the book and have to tell the stories out loud to remember them, like our people did in the old days. Grandma Ellie's family has wolf stories too, just like Graham's had in Sicily. Wolf is one of the 9 Iroquois clans, and it is the clan to which Grandma Ellie belongs. But my favorite stories are about Coyote, and not all of them are even from our people. Once I start reading Coyote stories, I search for them everywhere. In most of the stories, Coyote lies, cheats, steals, and causes trouble. These stories begin and end like lessons, telling people not to like Coyote, not to behave like he does. But he gets to be the hero sometimes too. In fact, some of my favorites are the story of Coyote retrieving fire to warm the others in winter, Mourning Dove's Okanagan story, Coyote fights some monsters, and the Cheyenne story, Coyote dances with a star. My aunts and cousins call me, affectionately I guess, the coyote among wolves on both sides of my family, partly because I'm mixed and partly because I'm so good at getting into trouble. I love writing and making art, and Grandma Ellie, just like Graham's, tells me stories are the way we remember. Grandpa John says that's a stupid thing to tell me. In school, when the class reaches the Native American unit in the history textbook, my teacher tells the other students about how there used to be Native people, about how Native people used to live, the stories they used to tell, how a lot of the names for rivers in Pennsylvania come from Native languages, and it's a nice way to remember and commemorate the people who used to live here. Our school, Lenape Creek Elementary, is named after the people who used to live here. I raise my hand and wait until I'm called on to answer that they still live here. I tell her about Grandpa John and Grandma Ellie. I tell her they're Native Americans, descended from Native Americans. She corrects me. When Thanksgiving comes around that same month, my teacher calls me up to her desk after recess. She asks if, because of my heritage, I'd like to help her build a teepee for the class. I think she's trying to be nice to me after the whole psychologist incident in another chapter, y'all. But it doesn't feel like she's being nice, and she's smiling too much, like maybe she's really making fun of me and trying not to laugh. I tell her I don't know how to build a teepee, and then she's not smiling so much anymore, but says I can still talk to the class about my ancestors if I want to, though it might help them understand more if I dressed like a Native American. I ask what this means, thinking about how Grandpa John and Grandma Ellie don't dress any differently from my Italian grandparents. She laughs out loud, smiles like she's making fun of me again, and says in that kind of sing-song girly voice you aren't supposed to resent anyone for having. Oh, you know, like Pocahontas. In hindsight, I will think my first shift into my coyote form should have been the day Grandma Ellie died, but it isn't. The day Grandma Ellie dies, my brother and I build a distinctly non-teepee stick fort outside and the air smells like rain. We like to play Harry Potter and pretend our stick forts are herbology greenhouses, or rather, I like to pretend that. My brother Georgie just likes to be outside. What's this one, Professor Sprout? I'm 10 and he's only 6, so he always plays Harry Potter and I fluctuate between playing the teacher and playing Hermione. Georgie crawls into our stick fort on his hands and knees, kicking up dirt clods as he empties his pockets of all the dandelion sprigs he has managed to find. Essence of Dittany, I say, great for healing wounds. We hear the phone ringing up at the house and we ignore it. It rings again and we keep playing. The 3rd time I run inside to answer it, assuming it's probably our mother and not wanting her to kill us. I didn't want to have to tell you this over the phone, but I couldn't not tell you, and people will be calling the house soon anyway. She drags it out all nervous-like, and I just know it's going to be bad news. Grandma Ellie died, she says into the phone, and I feel something seem to shift beneath my feet. Thunder crackles overhead like the sky doesn't believe it either. Grandma Ellie has had ovarian cancer for the last couple of years, off and on between remission and not. I'm too young to understand that this is a really bad type of cancer to get, as cancers go anyway. I'm also too young to understand that she'd refuse chemo. To me, she was always so strong and real that I can't imagine that the world can keep on turning without her in it. Upstairs, our dog Rusty jumps on my parents' bed to the beat of each thunderclap like he's dancing for Grandma Ellie, and probably he is. And then at the funeral, I keep expecting something to change, to gain some new insight, to figure something out. I don't know, feel her presence like everyone else says they can. But I told myself I needed to see her, like see her body, if I was ever going to believe that she could have really actually died. I figured I'd see her at the viewing, but then when I get into the funeral parlor and finally enter the room, it's to see an urn surrounded by flowers and a lot of pictures of Grandma Ellie looking remarkably not dead, looking as I remember her. And that's when I start to cry, because there isn't a dead body. But that's kind of an awkward thing to say. In the Pima story, Coyote and the Rattlesnake, the animals invent cremation because they don't know what to do with Rabbit's body after he dies, and they don't want Coyote to eat his remains. So they decide to burn him, but Coyote runs into the flames anyway, trying to eat Rabbit's heart, and burns his nose, which is why, say the Pima people, coyotes still have black noses today. Maybe this is why we had to do this to Grandma Ellie. As ash, nearly formless, no one can eat her heart. In the Cato story, Coyote and the Origin of Death, it is Coyote who decides that no one should get to live forever. That when it was their time and people died, they should stay dead forever. And in that moment, I start to hate Coyote for keeping my grandmother from me. The Cato story goes on to say that Coyote became scared of the rules he'd set into motion and was afraid of being hunted by the others for keeping their loved ones from returning to them. So he ran away and never came back, going on to live as a recluse who never had enough to eat. Part of me thinks he deserves this, and the rest of me wonders where he went. His spirit, this coyote, always hungry. And I'm gonna skip down, y'all, because I only have a minute left. Skipping down. Sorry. Lone coyotes, okay. I will remember all of these things about the trip, but I won't be able to find Grandma Ellie's reservation exactly on a map again, no matter how hard I try. Maybe that's what my father is looking for too. All those nights he studies maps and places dots and Sharpie at all the spots he has to make iron deliveries to. When I'm older, my dad will be disappointed I don't share his same interest in driving. It's freedom to go anywhere. But why don't you go just anywhere? How can you spend so many decades driving around the same place? I can discover something new every time I drive without ever getting lost. Lone coyotes handle their separation differently than lone wolves do. Lone coyotes try to make up for the instinctive loneliness they feel by interacting more intensely with their environments, scrounging up whatever they can find that can, even for just a moment, feel like home, shelter, plaything, packmate, love. Lone wolves are more apt to separate from their packs by choice or necessity, while lone coyotes are more likely to, whether it be from habitat loss, human construction and land development, hunting, or just finding themselves suddenly at the fringes of the same lands they were born to, just get lost. Maybe we're as scared of loss as we are of being lost, of fading away. My dad has his maps and his driving to correct for this, a scavenger for those as I am for stories. My name is Stella Sylvain Astoria, and this is everything I know to be true. Thank you.
Thank you, Juliet, for your riveting reading. Yes, everybody, please make note of any questions you have. And so wonderful to hear these readers. It was excellent. Next, I will be introducing Neda Spotted Wolf. Neda recently received an MFA in screenwriting from the Institute of American Indian Arts. She is Hidatsa and Ojibwe and grew up mostly on the Fort Berthold Reservation in North Dakota. She currently lives in Great Falls, Montana. She will be reading from a screenplay, and there will be various actors participating with her as well. Thank you to all of them, and please welcome Neda Spotted Wolf.
Hi, I am reading from my script, The Corralled. I edited it for time, and just think of a rock that's skipping over a lake. There's the beginning, and then it goes through. It's always moving forward, though. At the beginning, I just want to make a note. I'm not going to announce that the protagonist Brandy is doing a voice. I don't want to interrupt that. So as I read the direction of, yeah, so we'll just jump right in. All right. External, prairie, night, 1956. Wheat fields sway in the night. Hard rebounding. Roger Shields, native 10, runs along a dirt road. Clouds cover moon. Roger nears another dirt road. Car lights illuminate his whitened eyes. I'm not sure if we have all our readers here.
Running pulses through my veins.
Oh,
I heard my grandpa was a runner too. Dad said it's because grandpa always ran away from school.
10 years ago, external road, morning. Brandy 9 sprints past her dad, Dylan, 35. Dylan throws his arms up in mock despair. Internal, external, Brandy's house, later that morning. After the run, Brandy and Dylan drink bottled water on the porch as Junior, 7, peers at them through party curtains.
When I run, I like to think I'm connected to my grandpa, a man I've never met before, or maybe I'm trying to hang on to my dad.
1 week ago, external cemetery, late morning. Brandy, 19, and Junior, 17, watch a casket sink into the ground as young men sing and beat hand drums. Present, external, outside of town, pre-dawn. A speeding black Trans Am with tinted windows speeds down a 2-lane road, passing work trucks and semis. Houses dot yellow and brown landscape. The Trans Am reaches a small rest town on the dying side of an oil boom. External Main Street continuous. Street lights illuminate the dark morning. While part of town awakens, another winds down. Brandy's morning run. She nears a group of transients. Way, some sit, some sleep.
He sure risked a lot whenever he escaped. That kind of love for home is beautiful.
The Trans Am comes out of nowhere, barely missing Brandy. Shaken, he picks up a discarded beer can and throws it towards the retreating taillights.
Shit! Watch where you're fucking going, you blind bastard!
The group by the curb laughs, not at near disaster, but at her reaction and words.
You guys can go fuck yourselves too!
Brandy takes a deep breath, then restarts her run.
Sorry, Grandpa. God, I fucking hate it here.
Internal Brandy living room later that morning. Framed pictures hang. Newly exposed squares lighter than mellowed walls reveal holes, one the size of a fist. Brandy enters from the hallway, drying her hair with a towel. A thump comes from the kitchen, where Petey makes himself at home.
Whoops.
What the hell, Petey? I didn't hear you come in.
I let myself in.
A shaggy-haired, lanky 70-year-old native man wearing dingy jeans and a baggy Holy t-shirt appears at the kitchen doorway, holding the fridge door.
I let myself in when no one answered. I think I broke your fridge.
Just then, Junior breezes in from the hallway.
Petey, what news dost thou bringeth? Hey, is that fridge door for us? Thanks, man.
Junior lifts the door from Petey.
Nah, don't worry. Shit happens all the time. You hungry, man?
I could eat, yeah.
Let's see what we can dig up for you.
Junior and Petey disappear into the kitchen.
Randy, hurry up. The men are hungry. This food ain't gonna cook itself.
I swear to God, today's not my motherfucking day.
Junior and Petey stifle their laughter. External Main Street later, a mixture of res runners and new vehicles cruise up and down the street. Natives and non-natives stroll the sidewalks. Interior, Brandy's car simultaneous. Brandy drives. Junior stares.
I think the fridge is on its last leg.
The whole house is on its last leg.
Tried to make a pizza last night. Oven's broken too.
It's summertime. Why do we need it for?
A new shiny red truck passes, revving its engine.
I guess we can do without an oven. But why not get a new fridge?
With what?
That money you saved up.
That's money for after you graduate, so we can move far, far away from here.
Head. Turn. Ralph.
I'll get us a used fridge, but don't you want to get out of here?
Go where?
Anywhere.
External police station continuous. They pull into the parking lot the same time as Aaron, native 30s. He waits for Junior by the same red truck from earlier.
So what time's that meeting again? Do I really have to show up?
Well, yeah. They said Dad left us something. We should both be there.
He didn't leave us anything.
Still, they want us to come in, 3 p.m., be there.
Junior nods, gets out of the car.
Have fun doing community service.
Have fun pumping gas.
Aaron waves at Brandy as she drives past. She ignores him. Internal tribal building office, afternoon. Brandy and Junior sit across the desk from Judge Dusty, 40s native. Brandy stares wide-eyed at him.
So there you have it.
What do I do now?
It's up to you, Brandy. You can sell it or anything else you want with it.
Junior stands up, storms out of the room, slams the door. Dusty slides a map across the desk.
What's highlighted is yours.
Brandy studies it.
This place? He never mentioned owning it.
He was in negotiations to sell before he got sick.
He hands her a manila folder.
This makes everything official. Read it over, bring it with you to sign tomorrow.
Can't we do that now?
Our notary public won't be back until tomorrow.
She stands.
Thank you.
Brandy reaches the door.
Oh, and Brandy,
Yeah?
you might want to get a lawyer.
Why?
The land is sitting on the res's last reserve of untapped oil.
Brandy lets these words sink in. She leaves. Interior Brandy's car moments later. Brandy drives while Junior slumps in the passenger seat.
I'm sure he meant to include you.
Man, fuck him. He didn't really love me.
That's not true.
You know it is.
It's just that you're not 18. You know, I'll share with you.
No, stop the car. I want to walk.
Junior.
Stop the fucking car.
Junior jumps out as soon as the car stops.
So dramatic.
Junior slams the door. Brandy puts the car drive. External abandoned house next morning. Vast green expanse, spotted with trees and bushes. In the distance, a sliver of lake shimmers. Closer, a boarded up, weather-worn house. On one side, an 8-foot chain link fence makes a 20 by 30 feet enclosure. Inside, 10 native women, men and women mill about. They are middle-aged, drunk, and lucky. Most have been here before. Some are passed out, their bodies strewn like remnants of battle. Interior, Aaron's truck, simultaneous. Aaron drives up and sips coffee. In the back seat, Brandy, mouth taped, arms tied behind her back, legs bound. She thrashes, trying to get loose. External abandons into the enclosure, aka the corral. She fights them, almost escaping. External corral, a little later. Brandy and Junior sit side by side on the dirt ground. A transient man in his 50s, Silas, sleeps on his back not far behind them, one arm flung over his face.
I thought this roundup thing was illegal.
It is. I just don't know why we're here.
Oh, I know. They want the land, but how could they know about it?
Junior stares at the ground, making circles in the dirt.
Is there something you're not telling me?
I went to Aaron's yesterday.
Junior.
Well, I was a little pissed, and he lives close to where I got out of the car.
You told him?
Well, we started drinking, and I started talking.
You, a minor, had beers with Aaron, a cop.
Well, we were just talking, and it just sort of slipped out.
They sit in silence. Some of the corral began to stir. Behind them, Silas sits up, wipes his eyes.
Oh, shit. Brandy, what did you do? Robbed a fucking gas station?
What did you do? Public urination?
Speaking of that, there's where you can handle your business.
Silas points to a portable outhouse in a corner adjacent to the house's eastern edge.
Hope there's sanitizer.
Man, you guys sure kicked the shit out of those guys before they threw you in here.
Silas lets out a whoop.
Oh, yeah? You heard that?
Junior raises his voice so the guards can hear him.
You mean she kicked both of those cops' asses?
Shields.
Brandy and Junior both turn towards him.
Junior, come here.
I'll go see what they want.
Brandy grabs Junior's arm.
Careful. We'll figure something out. Don't do or say anything stupid. My coworkers will know something's up and come looking for me.
You sure about that, Sunshine?
Shut up.
Junior. Junior shrugs, rises, dusts himself off. External abandoned house outside the corral moments later. Out of eye and earshot from those in the pen. Aaron and Junior face her.
You sure you know where that document is?
Yeah, I watched where she put it last night.
All right. Now for the next phase of our plan.
External corral, simultaneous. Brandy watches the corner Junior around, waiting.
One thing I've
Brandy
learned is
voiceover.
there are no beginnings or endings. The past swirls and settles like dust on dry days, waiting for the next gust of wind so it can live again.
1 second, I have a quick question.
That's it.
I was just wondering if I have my fan going on in the background. I was wondering if it was given any sort of like any static or interference, or if you guys could hear me fine.
I think it's fine. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure. It's pretty warm day today.
Thank you, everybody.
Good Thank you, Neda, and to the talented actors who portrayed her script. That was a truly dramatic performance, both entertaining and engaging.
Oh, can I introduce them real fast? I forgot to do that at the beginning. Reading for Brandy is Sharon Henderson. Reading for the junior is Ines Hernandez-Avila. Reading for Petey and Silas is Roy Taylor. And for Aaron and Judge Dusty is Samuel and Emily Hunter. And thank you.
Thank you, Neda. And if you would like to acknowledge them further in the chat, I invite you to do so. At this time, we have our fourth guest reader. Received Ines Hernandez-Avila. Shaina Nez is our first. Shaina A. Nez is Ashihi, born Ratachini. Her maternal grandfather's clan is Tanizani, and Kinfetini is her paternal grandfather's clan. She is from Guadalupe, Arizona, and currently lives in Mentmore, New Mexico. Nez received her MFA in creative writing from the Institute of American Indian Arts, with her focus in creative nonfiction. She is a member of Saad Be Honjon, the Dene Writers Collective, and a board member for this Thunderbird Reading Series. Nez is a BFA program coordinator at Dene College in Saline, Arizona. She is also a finalist for the 2020 Eliza So Fellowship for her work entitled Sunchilds. I give you Shaina A. Nez.
Thank you, Chelsea. And hello, everyone. My name is Shaina. I'm just going to be reading a short chapter entitled A Mother's Work. So I'll begin there. Thank you guys for coming out to support. I don't know how mothers can continue to work hard, stay strong, and live. They either pray daily or hide their sorrows well. I don't know where I stand in the spectrum. I get impatient, and although Haley is my world, I'm so fearful of failure. When it was just me living this life, I was reckless, and it didn't matter if I failed or succeeded. I was living day by day, high off adrenaline and bad decisions. Writing kept me sane, and luckily I tried to keep at it when I could, but there are days when I just don't want to do anything. My mind will go completely numb, and I'm yearning for something to get me off this slump. When Haley's dad and I split, my body shut down, and I wasn't there in the present for a while. The time I spent in Shelly's house after we left Aztec, New Mexico, up to the point when I had finally moved back home to Arizona, I wasn't Shaina. The Shaina I knew, the one filled with pride and love, started fading, and now I just don't know who I am anymore. I try to not let my thoughts get the best of me because my thoughts can be so inspiring and uplifting, and sometimes they sink deep into a place I didn't know existed within me. My thoughts were mostly on the father of my child. Do single mothers think this way? Single fathers too? That they should be doing something more, to do more in life? In some cases, I sympathized with Jeremy, understood why he left me. Perhaps I wasn't doing my part as a girlfriend, supporting him enough or believing in him. Maybe I became too much with my habits and he grew tired of it. Or maybe our relationship only lasted up to a point because we had a daughter. I hate thinking of the last part because I do not regret having my daughter. She is the world to me, and as I said before, she saved me and continues to save me from myself. Then there are times when I just really hate him, despise him. Why should I feel guilty about anything? Why should I feel like I needed to do more to save our relationship, when in fact he gave up in the first place? I couldn't teach him how to be a man or a father, even though he rarely had such a figure in his own life. It wasn't my fault. If there is something Jeremy needed to do, it was to fix his insecurities. He could have worked on helping himself, but he decided to take the word help and date another girl who could carry his burdens. I sometimes worry one day all his frustrations will bury him, and he won't know what to do or how to deal. There was a time in between our split that we met up to talk, or eat lunch together, and he tried to tell me about the depression he's dealt with since his mother passed away. I felt bad for him and tried to sympathize with what he was dealing with. It was beyond what I have ever gone through. Then there was a downside to all the times we met. We still hooked up. I really wish that didn't happen between us. Us getting together gave me false hope. Boy, was I very wrong for having that bit of hope. I was so angry, but there was nothing I could do. I was helpless in my situation with him. When I moved back to Colorado, Jeremy gave me a ride to my new place. Jeremy's phone rang, and he looked at me and said, "Please don't make any noise." I nodded in agreement and just sat there thinking, maybe it was Shelly on the phone, the adopted aunt he was living with. Suddenly, Jeremy was calling someone babe and all this lovey-dovey shit, and I was angry. I wanted to outburst and say anything for that female to hear me on the other end, but I kept quiet, and I cried silently until he got off the phone. It was the first time in my life where I felt so weak and powerless. I hated myself. I should have known this was the end. I asked him why he was doing this, and the one thing he said that stayed with me was he'll always care for me because we have Haley. I hated that phrase. I felt like a total charity case, a hustle once he was done fucking with me. I told him that I wasn't going to be seeing anyone because unlike him, I can't see myself trying to introduce someone new in Haley's life so soon. Has he ever once thought of his actions? We arrived at my new place and Jeremy helped bring my stuff in. He looked around the kitchen and bedroom, not saying anything. It was a decent place, and he's probably wondering how I ended up getting help, but he knows exactly why and how this all happened. He wanted me out of Colorado and never to return, but here I am. I felt that so much would happen within this year, but I didn't know what exactly. Jeremy left me with my stuff and took Haley for a couple of days until I could get this place cleaned and settled in. It was a nice-sized mobile home. I had really nothing to compare it to. I hadn't have a place to call home since I was 18. If it had a roof, I was safe. I started cleaning the kitchen and living room area. My coworker told me her daughter was supposed to move in, but she found a place in Bayfield. I sanitized the kitchen, the walls, and the living room, and hyped myself up to look at the brighter side. This was another adventure, living in the countryside in Allison, Colorado. Thankfully, the place was furnished and I had a bed to sleep on. The setting was a lone ranch in the middle of state lines, New Mexico and Colorado. This place hinted to me to focus on my writings, and it was perfect. Despite my dramas, my writing kept me company. What I enjoyed about the place was the quietness, and no extreme wildlife I needed to fear of. The front door didn't lock properly, and every late night as I'm typing in the living room, I imagined that a mountain lion or a cougar would push through the door and I'd be a meal. I was a bit dramatic the first week. Neither porch light for the front or back door turned on, but I'd still go outside to smoke cigarettes. I was told never to fear the night, and also told to never be out late at night. Those nights remained silent. 2 donkeys would be the only things roaming around the ranch, along with Roxy, the neighbor's dog. The stars were luminous and beyond anything I've seen in quite a while. I'd catch the North Star and think of home and look at you. I'm alone now in this place, and I'm not going to give up. There are millions of single mothers around the world who've had it much, much worse than I did, so I needed to toughen up and go through it. When I came back to work for our new school year, I was given a lot of surprised glances. I was embarrassed to come back to work after the meltdown I had with Jeremy, but I had to keep my head high and greet everyone as I passed. Once our orientation began, the special education counselor, Todd, sat down by me. Todd was Belagana, always polite and a reader of literature also. He said, "Welcome back," and asked how the MFA program was treating me. I said good and told him about my first residency and who I was paired with for my mentorship, which was Pam Houston at the time. He was impressed and said how much his friend was a big fan of her. I couldn't believe it either. Being paired with Pam for my first semester set the foundation for my writing and balance of work. He told me that he can't wait to read what comes out from my program, believing in what I set to do. I wasn't sure about publishing. I'm still unsure. When I declared my undergraduate major in English writing at Fort Lewis College, One of the professors told me that writing was a survival of the fittest career, and that only 1 out of 5 good writers could come out on top. I wasn't sure if I wanted to come out on top. I just thought the idea of writing and becoming a better writer was enough. Writing bothered me day in and day out. I remember the time one of my basketball coaches said, "If you wake up and think basketball, you're a basketball player. If you wake up and think of something else, then that's what you're about to be." In my head at the time, I woke up and thought about writing and nothing alluring or of success, just writing small fictional stories, things I knew nothing about. Love and relationships. Even now, the irony of content is clear. So maybe I was a writer if that's all I thought about. Writing haunted me after Haley was born. Things from my memory, what I dreamt about, had kept repeating in my head. My writing wanted attention, but I almost gave up. When I was struggling with my teaching career and how it would affect Haley and Jeremy, my writing spoke up. It had awakened from the hole it was buried in. The roots, still intact, started to grow secretly until finally peeking from the earth. It wanted out at that time, and I probably knew that my relationship was going to end, that I was going to be a single parent, and that I needed to evoke and connect back with who I was to be. I seek comfort in the words I typed and the thoughts that fill in my head until it hurts. How I managed to get it out onto the processor is what gets me off or high, because I can feel normal again. I can decompress and repeat this process once my thoughts have exceeded. Once the thoughts took over and I started to type or journal thoughts in the early morning, I felt progress was being made. Jeremy would wake some late nights or early mornings and would ask if I was okay. I would say, "I'm fine." I told him that I was working on a piece about my grandfather, and that was to be a part of my admission manuscript. Jeremy never once put my writing down. I think that's the one thing I could give him for decency. He never said I wasn't going to be a writer. He believed in me, and only for so long, but it beats than what I had experienced. The beginning of Haley's stories made me cry. Who the hell was I to tell this story? To talk about my daughter Haley. I wasn't sure if I could even swing that subject to be anything relevant, because who wants to read about motherhood nowadays? I felt motherhood too wasn't appreciated as much as a single, promiscuous journey through life. Living life by comparison has never occurred to me until I became a mother. I didn't realize how much judgment we are faced with on a daily, from going to work, eating in a public place, or even just picking up groceries from the market. When I took Haley anywhere with me, the looks ranged from polite smiles to snarky or annoyed reactions once a car seat was in the proximity. Some days I felt apologetic, and there were times I was like, "Fuck that. I'm not sorry for bringing my daughter along with me. Deal with it." So the basis of my writing had to come from what I knew and the subjects I know of. Because of my dreams that circled around such subjects, I took time for myself to write and see it on the page. I gave myself an ultimatum about the IAI MFA program. If I didn't get admitted, I would stick to being a teacher only. I had no more excuses. If I failed, I knew I would be okay because I was used to failing. I never knew what it meant to give up. I had to love myself, but not resort to looking myself in the mirror to say I love you or I forgive myself. To do anything I can in providing a better life for my daughter. I'm no one without my daughter. She is me. Thank you.
Thank you, Shaina, for your emotionally incisive reading. All please offer your snaps in the chat for the dynamism of Shaina and all of these guest readers and recent IAIA grads. As you can see, each of our guest readers this evening is very strong in their distinct aesthetic and their performativity. This is very enriching for us to be inspired by you all. Thank you again. Now it is time for our featured reader of the evening, the one who is showing us where the songs are born, so to speak, Ines Hernandez-Avila. She is Nimupu Nez Perce of Chief Joseph's Band, enrolled on the Colville Reservation, and she is Tejana. Her poetry, visual art, scholarship, and activism have long bridged Native American studies and Chicano and Chicana studies. She is a senior professor in the Department of Native American Studies at the University of California, Davis, and one of the 6 founders of the Native American and Indigenous Studies Association. She is a 2-time Ford Foundation Fellow, doctoral, and postdoctoral. She teaches the Native American Indigenous Literature courses and the Native American Indigenous Religious Traditions courses at the undergraduate and graduate levels, as well as a course she created, Native American Literature in Performance, very relevant to our reading tonight. Her research interests focus on the relationship of autonomy, both personal and collective, creativity, spirituality, and social justice. Her most recent project is an edited collection, Where the Songs Are Born, Donde Nacen los Cantos, Contemporary Mayan and Zoque Poetry of Chiapas, contracted to SUNY Press, which is in its final revision stage. This collection includes the work of 20 poets, whose works will appear in their original languages, Spanish and English. She did all of the translations into English and wrote the introduction. We're so honored to have her here with us this evening, and I invite you all to applaud her and welcome her along with me. Ines Hernandez-Avila.
Thank you. Tatskulawit, Kechiyaoyang, for this invitation. I'm really happy to be here with you all. And I'm also just going to read. This first poem is called The Big Game. Words spelled in tears and outrage cut across this page as war sounds from home permeate the world. Profanity demands attention like a rotten son whose ways have ruined him forever, who needs a side to cheer for in a war, who can revel in death and vow retaliation of a worse kind in the face of atrocity, who treats news reports like they were the comments and updates of sportscasters. This is the big game in town. Diversion must be on a massive scale to direct attention from everyday horror. Why becomes a sinful question, a condemned word. I know why, synonymous with treason. Peace, justice, solidarity, movement, words which speak of the world birthing, the new world being brought into being, dreamed, realized. These words offend those who argue still for right of conquest, who see still in facile conjurations of an enemy the epitome of savagery. How do they recognize that image so well? Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the most cowardly of them all? Spirit of mine, heal your home, my body. Somewhere when I'm a small girl, darkness enters my body and destroys me. How do I know? My body said so. No words, no way to speak, no way to get help. Secrets, nausea, shame, horror. Speechless, I'm speechless. I'm 4 when it happens, 4 years old. Funny that we say it that way. How old are you? 4 years old. Old at 4 years, ancient at 4 years, having been plunged into madness at 4 years. When I'm 44, I name the madness. I release the secret. I am outraged. I sob. My body sobs with me. My spirit sobs. My mind collapses. My spirit lifts me up. I get up. Spirit of mine, heal your home, my body. Once more with love, He's just a wily old, rub you the wrong way, big pod, sorry looking, yet somehow kind of magnetic, Itzayaya, even when he's looking just pitiful and aggravating. Hey, that's just the way coyotes are. Now you can be offended at him if you want, because he probably intended you to be. He just loves it when you fume, you see. In fact, when you don't fume and you throw his foolishness back to him instead, with a big old grin yourself and a flick of your hips and a swing of your hair, you'll make him really mad. But while he's telling you off, yelling that you're the cause of all his woes and calling you a goddamn woman and going on about how no one does things right anymore, least of all some snippety woman, and if he starts commenting on your appearance and how you're not as pretty or as young as you used to be, then you know you've got him, if nothing else for a second or two. Because all the while he's going off on you, he knows you've got him too, because he's a real good listener. And while his mouth is flapping away with a mind of its own, he's leaning up against the wall of his own brain, checking himself out and kicking himself for falling for his own trick. But he's intrigued too, because he was expecting a predictable and boring win. And now he's got a fight on his hands. And in that moment, you're anything but unattractive. In that moment, he wants you. He wants you bad. Coyote warnings. Be wary when you're traveling with coyote. Example, the two of you arrive in Mexico City in the evening and you're still 2 hours away by bus to your point of destination. You're traveling to ceremony. He's an elder and he's asked to come along. Be wary when Coyote says, pulling the hairs of his beard, you know, it's not good to arrive by nightfall. It makes people think you're sneaking around. Consequence, because you're on a slim budget, you get a sparse 2-star hotel room for the two of you. 1 room, 1 bed. You roll up a blanket and put it between the two of you and you keep your clothes on. You cross your fingers and try to doze off. After a very short while, you feel some movement on the other side. Coyote is inching closer. Get back to your side, you say sternly. There's silence. Be wary when Coyote mumbles, turning over on his back. My stomach hurts. Maybe you could massage it. You think to yourself, I could kill him. But you answer, sounding especially drowsy and unfazed, but saying very firmly, go to sleep. You'll feel better in the morning. Silence. The next morning, the two of you leave for the hills of Chalma, where there's a grand danza ceremony happening. You arrive at the camp of your elders and settle in for the week-long events. You suddenly see Coyote meet his uncle. Yes, the older brother of the elder who heads your circle is a coyote too. You realize you hadn't remembered this. They greet each other and you can see their ears perk to attention. You can't help the belly laughs you feel throughout your body. Now Coyote is wary, Coyote the younger, although not so much younger. Coyote uncle is quite at ease. They smile, and the uncle motions us both to sit down to eat. Suddenly, you discover another important fact. Your elder, the woman you hold up as exemplary, wise, and passionate leader, is completely smitten by Coyote. Her eyes are twinkling stars dancing to meet his. Her smiles are constant. Her laughter is sensual. Uncle Coyote takes note. I am watching everything. Be wary, I think. We're feasting on rice and beans, savoring the juicy meal, fresh corn tortillas, pico de gallo. Then Uncle Coyote holds up a fresh serrano chile and smiling, gestures to Coyote to eat it. Coyote pauses, then shakes his head no. Uncle holds up 2 chiles and again offers them. Coyote tells me to ask in Spanish what he will get if he eats them both. The uncle laughs and says, "My sister, you will get my sister." Much laughter from all of us in the camp. The laughter gives Coyote the instant that he needs. He answers, "And if I eat 3 chiles, will I get the brother too?" Roaring laughter, the uncle pouts and shakes his head, saying, "No." Coyote has won. Once again, this time, he has beat himself. Be wary. I'm not sure how I'm doing on time.
Ellie can let us.
Okay.
Just checking the time right now. And you have 6 minutes.
Okay. Coyote really wanted to be here today. I had to laugh when I heard the earlier reader, and I thought, okay, that's why all these poems came up. But this one is an excerpt from a longer piece, and it's called Coyote and Che Guevara. Coyote smiles and nods when he hears how the Latin American revolutionary Che Guevara always said, "We live in the belly of the beast here in the United States. Kindred spirits think alike." So it seems appropriate nowadays that Coyote's hanging around. I'm Nimipo, and according to my people, when creation began, Coyote slayed this monster, see, this beast, and flung the body parts far and wide, bringing into being many tribes, amongst them mine. The Nimipo were made when Coyote washed his hands and mixed the cleansing waters with the monster's drops of blood, purifying them and then sprinkling them onto the earth. To slay the monster, Itzayaya had to first figure out a way to get into the monster's belly and then organize the animal people inside to be ready for the monster's defeat. In that long ago time, he had 5 knives and he taunted the monster until the monster swallowed him. That way he could go to work from inside with his weapons. The way I see it, Coyote today, he's already here inside, kind of wandering around in the belly with us human people and animal, sky, water, plant, and stone people trying to figure out a way out for us all. Meanwhile, he's just working hard on injuring the monster from within. I believe the caribou people are with him, the salmon people, the bees, the gray wolves, turtles, condors, polar bears, and all the endangered species and all of our animal relations and plant relations. They've been cautiously jubilant and relieved recently as they sense the change is coming. The thing about Coyote is this: he's willing to give his life. Yes, Coyote is willing to sacrifice himself. His running partner is Fox, and if Coyote is slain and there is one hair left of him, one bit of DNA, Fox can bring him back to life. The odds are against Coyote, or so it seems. The world turned upside down we're living in is one huge illusion, an hechiceria, a spell of the worst kind, because the conjuring is intended to make us think change is impossible. But Coyote is much more astute than any hechiceria thrown up to block him. He is, we must remember, the master of conjuring. Is the enterprise dangerous? Of course. But he knows he can be resuscitated. If you ask me, I think I'll hang with him. Like I said, he always comes back to life, always, and I sort of prefer those odds. I think of the attempts to exterminate coyotes and what happens. They have an internal mechanism that tells them to have more babies. I think of the attempts to erase indigenous peoples from the face of the earth, and yet here we are. Yes, I will take these odds. And then I'll finish with this one. Itzayian Mamiats, we are the children of Coyote. I'm a drop of blood shaken from the paw of an old grandpagram after they washed their hands deliberately to birth me. As I hit the earth, I throw myself with abandon into her arms. Blood, water, earth mingle into me. I flip onto my back to reach for the sun, and I am born. Kechiao, thank you.
Thank you, Inez. I love all that your reading reflected on duality and coyote and danger, as well as our own complicity. It was beautiful. So I'm inviting all of our listeners to ask questions by placing them in the chat, as any of you would like. As we are awaiting some of those questions, I have some to share with our readers. My first question is an open one for any of our 5 readers as they would like to respond. Throughout these readings, we saw common themes of danger and risk. Danger in relationships, in dreams, in travel as a woman, in meeting Coyote, or even being Coyote. Would any of you share or like to share about how you negotiate safety in your process of writing danger? I'll place the question in the chat so you can see it.
I can go ahead and answer that question.
Thank you, Jill.
Okay, I put in headphones, so I hope that y'all can still hear me. As far as, and if my phone dies, I'm really sorry. Like it's a really old phone, so it goes from 0 or 60, more like 60 to 0 rather than 0 to 60 really fast. So I think it should be good. The way that I navigate, I think for me, navigating concepts of safety and danger in writing is really interesting because like Chelsea read in my bio, one of the reasons that I write was not only to help me to process my own trauma through the werewolf stories that I write that are compiled together in in Wild Heart, but kind of to help other people feel empowered to talk about their own traumas, their own whether it's abuse situations or like mental health stuff or any identity stuff, anything like that. So I think that it's a fine line because obviously it's hard to write when you don't feel safe, and it's interesting to try to write stuff. I don't know, maybe probably other people can relate to this as well. Like it's hard to try to write about the trauma when you're going through it. Like when you're in the thick of it, it's impossible. I mean, for me, it was always impossible. So there's something really empowering in getting to a place where I can write about a specific event, because obviously that doesn't mean that I'm over it, but that I'm doing something about it, that I'm giving it voice, that I'm preserving the story so that I don't have to keep it in my brain anymore. So it's really interesting because even though I'm writing about dangerous moments and dangerous times, I am doing so from like a position of having reached the other side of it and having reached a position of safety. So I can put my characters in danger when I feel safe or some semblance of safe. But if I'm not feeling like I'm on solid ground, then I have a hard time with writing about danger in writing because it gets too real. So it's an interesting line, and I don't know, I hope I answered the question right. But
So you're seeking to cultivate safety as a way to support and grow.
yeah, cultivating, I mean, safety for me, and then also to empower other people who might be, or who are going through their own different struggles. Like I want my writing, it's kind of the opposite. Like if my writing is, I'm writing about danger, but I'm doing so from a position of safety, it's to help people who read it do the opposite. Like people who feel like they're in danger, maybe like find safety in the writing or find safety in the world of that, you know, whether by just relating to it or feeling like there's voice to the stories or voice to the experiences, or you know, even if it's just like empowers people to know that they're not alone. But so that's why a lot of the themes in my writing tend to be about like mental health and mixed race identity, mixed blood identity, and just kind of like being a woman, all that kind of stuff. So
Yeah,
getting to be a dangerous creature is empowering too.
yeah, I
Revisit it in my writing.
see that Shaina may be weighing in as well on this.
Yes.
Yeah. Going off on what Juliet said, in terms of the writing process, I'd say this story that I read went through so many phases in terms of just, I guess, how I was going to be approaching the story. I did most at times felt like it was just testimony, and it was just like me ranting on about something that I've lost and something that I should just get over. So I went through so many stages of writing about that. But then in terms of trying to look kind of deep within myself to see what would be the gain out of telling this story, and I guess what is the bigger picture. And of course it all goes back to like my daughter and Haley as the character of, I guess, perseverance. So in terms of writing in a safe space, I try to make sure that I'm being mindful of my daughter one day reading this. So in ways of me writing and feeling like at first it was just testimony and complaining, it went through all these stages of my emotions reflecting in the writing. I don't know if that made any sense, but I just felt like I had to go through a lot of stages and getting chapters like these down when it came to writing about personal things, and mainly trying to keep it within the realm of my daughter. So it fluctuated a lot, but I'm really glad that it's coming together in the space that's provided for the most part.
Yeah, and can you hear me? The concept of safety, for me, writing is very empowering. So I like to leave like a way out. You set up the sense of danger, but you have to leave something there. It's like it's a maze, and you get to get out away from the danger, but it should be empowering.
I love the idea of creating a door. So we do have around.
I wanted to say something. Yeah. I just wanted to follow up on that. I really like what everybody said, and I just saw Juliet's note about not being scared abusers may one day read my writing and react. I think that what I've done, and I was looking for this poem that I just couldn't, it did not want to be found, but it's kind of a tell-off poem to a misogynist and an abuser, predator, and it was so incredibly healing for me to write it, get it out, and then read it. And it began to be sort of hilarious, because when I would read it in public, people would say, "Is that so-and-so? Is that so-and-so? Is that so-and-so? You're talking about so-and-so?" And we're all different names. And I thought, oh, I guess there's just more than the one, right? And I mean, I can laugh now. It wasn't what I write about in the poem is not funny, but it's, you know, it does show the power that we have in creating that space for ourselves where we go for it, you know, where we go for what we need to say and put it down. And it's so freeing. And I'll stop there.
I think it is very empowering to other people to hear these stories told. I think it can make them feel safe because it's possible to achieve that safety. That premise is presented in the hearing or reading of the work. So that's brilliant to hear from all of you. I'm going to check for a moment to make sure that I'm addressing some questions in the chat. We have a request for Ines. If you would share a little more about your work in Chiapas. This question is from Ellie.
I became fascinated with Chiapas in the late 90s, and obviously for one because of the Zapatistas, but I met some indigenous women writers from Chiapas, and I started going to visit them, and then the more I visited them, the more I saw this world of this amazing world of Mayan and Soque, predominantly Mayan writers and artists and intellectuals, and all of them writing in their languages, translating their work into Spanish. And I just fell in love with being there, and I created a study abroad course. So I as much as possible, I take students down for 4 weeks for study abroad. And it's called Chiapas Social and Literary Movements. So we do visit Zapatista autonomous communities, but we also spend a lot of time with the writers and the artists, and it was life-changing, really. And it made me happy that I can speak Spanish, because I was raised in Galveston, Texas by, of course, my mom, who's the Nez Perce, and my dad, who's Tejano, or you know, Texas Mexican. And I didn't learn my language. My mom and dad both wanted me to dominate English, but my Mexican grandparents made me learn Spanish. So I know Spanish, and so that's why I'm very comfortable traveling down there and working with them. And I just collaborated with the Library of Congress to put some recordings of some of the writers online. It's going to premiere soon. We're finishing up the website, but you'll be able to access, I think it's 10, I don't remember, it's 10 or 12 Mayan writers online from the Library of Congress here. Yeah. So I'll stop there.
Thank you. Ellie says she loves the phrase "to dominate English."
Yep.
A little bit on this continued theme of languages and activism in creative work. I would like to ask the question, and I would again invite any of you who would like to respond to respond. For artists who would like to involve Indigenous language in English-directed writing, what advice would you give to those who don't know where to start? And I realize this question could also be addressed in terms of activism or social change. So I'd like to invite some thought on this question. And again, I will post this in the chat.
I guess I can speak a little bit about language incorporation. Personally, I'm still learning my language, which is Dene. I can read it better than I can speak it, so that's kind of the funny thing. It's a little backwards, but my whole family is fluent in Navajo language. So I love hearing the language. I feel like I'm always around it. I'm surrounded by it, so in a way, I just feel like so much a part of it, though I'm not fluent, but I am working toward it. In terms of writing it, I just started out very small, and I just focus on what the main source of language is for, I think, a lot of us, and it's ke, which is family and kinship. And that's where I basically started incorporating more of my language in my writing. Plus my daughter Haley, she is half Navajo and half white. So again, she's gonna be wanting to learn the language or wanting to grasp an understanding of the language. So with me sprinkling it a little bit here and there, I try to mainly use it toward the concept of ke, which is, yeah, family again. But it's so funny. Today I was using this, my little backup dictionary. But I use this a lot, and I'm constantly running to my parents who are in the next room, asking them words, asking them how to say certain things. So they're forever. I have my walking dictionaries in there, and then I have this. So I'm really trying to just use that in a form of bettering myself and just making sure I'm taking care of my daughter in the sense of language and culture too. So it's a learning process, and maybe it is in a way an activist type of approach for me, decolonizing myself and trying to get me and my daughter on the right track of that. But yeah, I see so much value in the language and just being around it. So it's very, very important, and I do like the question, Chelsea, so thank you for asking that.
Well, when I think of the work that I've done in Chiapas, I think one of the reasons why I'm attracted to them there is because they are promoting language sustainability, language revitalization and sustainability through creative writing. So they hold workshops to teach people how to write poetry, fiction, theater in their languages. And that just blows me away. I mean, it just, of course, there's more, I think there's a lot of Mayan speaking. Mayan language is one of the biggest, they have a lot of language speakers. But even so, throughout Mexico, indigenous writers are doing that. They're promoting language revitalization through literary creation of literature, literary recitals, going into communities, reading poetry and stories to the community members, many of whom may not even speak Spanish. They may only speak their language. And so that just, to me, is so awesome. I you know, and I think, like what you were saying, is it how do I say your name?
Shaina.
Shaina. Yeah. I love what you're doing, you know, because that's it, carrying the book around and having them everywhere and going into the next room and talking, you know, that's, you know, if I were anywhere near Nespelem, Washington, that's what I would be doing, you know, with my family up there. And I'm taking baby steps, but I really, you know, in the time that I have left on this earth, I'm going to do my best to learn as much as I can. It's sometimes I'm on an S-Purse language list, and so sometimes I'm shy. But I read everything, and so whenever Phil Kashkash puts a phrase out, and so I sit there and I mouth it out, and I mouth it out every single time, every day. So I'm doing that every day, and I don't know. I think the more we can encourage each other to do that, more awesome it'll be. Yeah.
I agree. And there's a question in the chat which is relevant to your speaking toward those of us who are natives in the part of Turtle Island, which is the United States, and in some cases, many parts of Canada and Alaska, where our languages may have experienced even more duress than some of those in South America and Latin America. And the question is this language activism trying to reclaim a native language that has been called dead by the colonizer majority? Can we think of any resources to suggest for furthering learning a, quote, dead language? I'll reflect briefly on this from the perspective of Osage Nation, that there are languages among our nations in the United States that are being called dead, and the process toward reconstituting of records created by ethnographers and linguists can eventually lead to reconstitution when there are some native speakers or partial speakers, and this is a very difficult process to which people may devote their entire professional careers or home lives. I think, as Ines said, we have to simply encourage one another to engage with whatever our nations do offer. That would be my initial thought.
I think what I was wondering with my question was, and I guess, you know, for Ines or anyone who wants to say anything, is basically, I don't know, like, no one really speaks fluent Narragansett anymore. Even like talking to people, you know, who still live on the reservation, like a word here and there. And that's kind of how I'm learning. Like I can learn a couple words, or I can learn, you know, some words, but a lot of the language resources that I find are like really creepy. They're like from colonizer perspectives and from boarding school perspectives, and they're like, I don't know, like teaching my people to say like Jesus stuff basically in the language, and I'm trying to find like non-Jesus things, like non-Jesus language resources, but also at the same time, like there's a weird sort of like, I know it's a project I want to pursue further for like reclaiming Narragansett language and just language in general, but also like this isn't our fault as a tribe. It's more like, you know, it's because our, you know, we're punished for speaking it, and, you know, all the different reasons and things that have happened. But I also have wondered if I'm like, I don't want to say wasting my activism, that's the wrong term, but if there's like a better way I can be, you know, helping my people with my writing and helping all Native people and Indigenous people other than like the language stuff. Like I think it's valuable, but if there's more pressing ways to help, like, I don't know, like that's, I don't know. Sometimes I'm like, oh, am I going on some like academic track that's not useful to my people or people in general, or like, I don't know. It's just a weird experience. Just.
I agree with you. It's a weird experience. Absolutely. And I think two sources came to mind. There's a professor by the name of Wesley Leonard. I don't know if you've heard of him. He's at UC Riverside, and he works with the Miami language, and which was said to be gone. And so he's done some really, really significant work in recapturing. I'm sorry, I can't talk about it off the top of my, you know, I don't know his work that well, but I know he's having some successes. And the other thing is there's a book that's called Pablo Tac, a Luiseño scholar. I think that's the full name. It's by Elizabeth Haas. And Pablo Tac was a Luiseño person who, when he was a child, was taken to the Vatican along with a whole bunch of other little kids from the United States. I think it was from the United States, to and their whole purpose in being taken was to document their language. But now that you have contemporary Luiseños looking at what he wrote, you see that he was subversive because obviously he was Catholicized, right? And they were indoctrinating him. But you see in what he was using as his language exercises in his language where he's letting us know what he's really feeling. And that book is really, really finely done. And James Luna wrote the foreword to that book. But it is a dilemma because you're the only one that can decide what you're going to devote your attention to. But it's just so many, like a lot of our graduate students are going into the archives and just reading with this other eye, right? And so you read between the lines, you read, what the missionary says that's happening, and then you read that there's a response by a Native person, and then you're able to pull back and say, okay, what's really happening right here? And then that's when we get to unweave and reweave. And Deborah Miranda, of course, has done this, and so many other people have done this. Willie Bauer, California Through Native Eyes. I mean, there are people who are doing that, right, and spending that time. So but you're right. You're completely right. It's like you have to do I want to do this? You have to know in your heart that that's what you want to do, and what that means as a commitment, right? Or if you feel like you can do other things that are just as important. So we shouldn't be prescribing to people what to do, right?
Thank you, Inez. I want to ask one more question, as others may share their questions or not. I don't know if they're also feeling shy like Inez sometimes does with her language participation. But as we know, within the creative process, Shaina mentioned that there was many drafts or iterations of her emotional process. We also know that when we're writing a poem or a story, or as Josie and Inez may do, making visual art, that there's stages of design from beginning to the end. And I wonder if you can provide some strategies for creating balance and flow throughout the creation of an entire work. So in other words, at moments when there have been blocks, how have you used various disciplines within one medium or across mediums to help you move forward?
I think when you're creating, no matter what you're creating, whether it's a painting or a poem, you're looking for a whole concept. You have to see a picture for me, like if I create a painting, I do a sketch, just put it out there. Or a poem, you just sit down and write whatever occurs to you at the moment, and then you par that down and try to get to the essence of what you're trying to get to.
I love that you're a painter. I love it. And I really enjoyed all of your readings, yours and everyone else's. And you all have to know that I'm well, obviously the oldster. I'm 73. You're all like very early in your careers, and it's really exciting to hear all of you. I think more than anything, I've always been a poet and shy to say it, but an artist. And yet I went into academia, and I went into Native American studies, and I've been at Davis for a long time, since 86, and gave blood for that program. And my work, my creativity got put on the back burner, and because we had to create a graduate program. And so now, and now that I'm nearing retirement, I'm finally realizing that I'm painting again. I'm painting again, and if I get stuck with something, this is going to Chelsea's question. When I get stuck with something, I go and paint. And I love abstract because I don't have to think, and I feel like the world just drops off. It's just me and the paints and the canvas, and nothing else comes in. And so I get renewed that way. And I think whenever we do anything like singing or dancing, you know, or anything that gives us life, it helps us all the way around. And so even at my age, you know, I'm like on my steps to do my thing now. It's finally my turn. I feel like it's finally my turn. So I love that you're painting too. So.
Thank you, Inez. Neda, I believe, couldn't hear my question, so I'm just going to briefly share it again. That I was asking what strategies we might use for creating balance and flow in moving through all the stages of a work, whether it be by creating in various mediums or strategies for moving forward in one medium. And Neda, I'd love to hear if you do have a thought on that. As I can imagine, there are so many stages to creating a script, and it was so delightful to hear from the actors bringing so much energy and dynamism into a work that was dramatic just as a text, but also multi-lived through the work of the actors.
So what is the question of like the creative process? Like what kind of, what were you, I'm sorry, my audio is kind of bad. Is it on?
Yes, I'm placing the question into the chat.
Okay, let me check that real fast. But I think you have, when you're creating, for me, this kind of goes back to safety as well. When we were talking about safety writing, in certain, I write nonfiction as well, and that you have to be brave, you know, to the further you go in. Let me turn off this fan here. But you have to be brave in your writing, and as the others have said, nonfiction, it takes a lot of introspection, a lot of looking around you. I got to the point where I was describing so many others around me, but in certain workshops, it would always come back. In college, it would always come back to, but where are you in all this? Where are you? And so it got to the point where I had to take the final step, where I placed myself in the writing, and that's a big step because you're vulnerable. And at that point, I wasn't ready to do that because there are, like Shaina says, there's a lot of levels of emotions and different things. So that's when I made a decision to go to IAIA, I was at first planning on going into the nonfiction, and then I thought, well, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna take everything right. I'm not ready right now. I might be ready years from now, or tomorrow, or 20 minutes from now, who knows? but I'm going to take everything and I'm going to give those to other characters. And so when I write right now, I like, for me, it's safer to give it to other, because I want to write about certain things that are powerful, that make people feel, that, you know, that transfers. But at that point, I wasn't ready to do that with myself. And I think that's fine. I think you just have to find your own. And as far as different strategies or what you can do to help in the creative process, you know, we're in a pandemic right now. And for me, social distancing kind of came probably about like 4.5 years ago, when I became my mom and my brother's caregiver. And so that came years. And when this started, I didn't realize how much I depended on me time, you know, like going for walks, exercising. That is a huge part in the creative process. And just to make sure that you do those things, because there was probably about like 2 to 3 weeks where I felt like I was being watched if I was out walking, like I was being judged. So there was like a few weeks where I wasn't doing that, and that had a whole difference. It made a difference in my writing. It changed things. So I think when I approach writing, it's a holistic approach. So it's mental, it's physical, it's what you see around you, and yeah. So just make sure you're taking care of you as well.
Yeah, I think when we take care of ourselves, the growth springs out. And we'll be closing here in a few moments. I would like to ask Ines if you would share a little more about how readers might find more of your poems if they'd like to seek them out. And I think you may be on mute.
I have poems in lots of different places, but I can't. I do send poems out. Sometimes I'm invited to submit poems, and I accept the invitation. I think really I've been focusing on creative nonfiction, and then kind of personal essay. And so I have a couple pieces in About Place, the online journal, and I have manuscripts that, oh my God, I've had them, and just getting ready for today. I was looking at all the work that I have, so I'm getting ready to submit some manuscripts. I have more than one to submit, but I don't. I mean, you can find them, but I'm not that published. Well, I am, but I'm not. I don't have collections.
Yes,
And,
I apologize.
you know, so that's why I was saying that it's my time now. So yeah, I
think that
I think the other thing too, let me just say this, is that I am 73. I sort of grew up in the 70s social movements. I was an activist, an organizer, and I remember back then I would lead marches and rallies with poems, with poetry, and with my guitar, and so I saw at that time, I felt that poetry was an arma, if you will, a weapon to create transformation, and so I'm okay with that. I'm okay with knowing that that's how I came to poetry, and that's how I loved using it, loved contributing that to community struggles. So that, yeah.
Absolutely. I think Chandra Zafran says in the chat, she loves this. You're saying it's my time now. And your response makes me think of how the Zapatistas and the revolution in Chiapas, it moved from the streets and into where it is also flourishing on the page. And as your revolution and your work is moving, it has always been on the page, but also moving onto the page in more ways. It's a wonderful gift for us to follow that. So we will be looking. And also Tammy shared some of Ines's work in About Place, a wonderful piece, which you can all find in the chat.
That was
Well,
my rabbits, yeah. That was about my rabbits. I have incredible relationships with rabbits. But the other thing too is when the book comes out from SUNY, where the songs are born, I did all the translations, and that kicked my butt. I mean, it's when you think the poems are written in their original indigenous languages, translated in Spanish, and then I'm translating from the Spanish, and yet trying to know enough about who the poets are, and I've spent time with them. I ask them questions. I listen. When they speak about their belief systems, but just being careful about how to translate. And so the poems have to come out as poems in English as well. So I love doing that because I feel like we need to be talking to each other. The North and South need to be talking to each other. And there's so many Indigenous people in the South, and they're writing, and I would love for there to be that exchange, which means that we need to translate poems written or literature written in English into Spanish as well. So those are the things that sort of move me.
yes, I don't even know if all writers or many writers realize how translation is a primary form of writing. The PEN America Writers Group and Writers Representation and Resource Foundation has a committee for translation work to promote translators receiving more recognition for their work of creating greater understanding. So I think that that's one of the reasons that it's so exciting to me to be able to have you here, is that you were the first person who helped me understand about how the North and the South need to be talking, and introduced me to some of those poets, and are facilitating that dialogue with where the songs are born. So I think that that's really the first place where I will be reading your work next and appreciating it there. So this concludes our reading, and I thank you to everyone for participating. We thank our special guest readers as well. We thank Ines. It's a beautiful time and beautiful words that we've exchanged. I do want to share with you all that our next reading is August 13th and will feature new IAIA mentor, poet, and essayist Cynthia Cruz, with MFA grads Jay Mercado and Ellie Cradley Gardner in a special 1-hour event. Please use the Thunderbird Reading Series Gmail account to RSVP, and I will place that in the link. I did also share in the chat, for any of you who are curious, another resource for working to revitalize in progress Indigenous languages. That will be through the Native American Health Center, a class with resources for practicing our Indigenous languages as they are being revitalized. So if there's anything that you would like to say, or any comments someone would like to say in closing, I'll give you a moment so everyone may be heard.
Well, I just want to say that it was an honor to be with all of you. Thank you for the invitation, and I look forward to reading your work. I look forward to really seeing more and more of your work. So thank you, Chelsea, for the invitation.
Thank you.